Good day everyone, this is John and welcome to another OpenBSD tutorial. Today we'll set up SSH and SFTP on an OpenBSD 6.1 server. As you may know by now, SSH is a secure protocol to remotely access a host from the network. In most cases, it replaced the unsecure and obsolete Telnet protocol, which unfortunately is still used in some cases. Similarly, SFTP is a way to use FTP over SSH, allowing for encrypted file transfers. Needless to say that both are critical for remote administration, and you'll be pleasantly surprised on how relatively easy the setup process is on OpenBSD. So here's the plan for today. We'll first set up chroot directories, also called shells or sandboxes, for each of our services. Then we'll create users and groups tied to SSH and SFTP. Afterwards, we'll start with the simplest SSH server you can have with OpenBSD. Then after, we'll enable SFTP. Now that we have a game plan, let's go and do it. I'll assume that you've already installed OpenBSD as per instructed in the first video, but did not enable SSHD yet. We'll first create our chroot directories. Ideally, they should be on their own separate partitions for even better security. But if you can't, all you need to do is to create new directories for the moment. So we'll create two directories, one for SSH and one for SFTP. So in your shell, as root, first create the SSH directory using the mkdir command, and then do the same for the FTP directory. Next, we'll need to install a base system in the SSH chroot directory so that users can actually execute programs and do stuff. We don't need to do this for the FTP chroot directory, since all we need is the FTP server, which is actually integrated in the SSH daemon. So first, move into your SSH directory, and next we will mount the OpenBSD installation CD using the mount command as shown on the screen right now. And we will mount it into the /mnt directory. Let's make sure it worked. Yep, it worked. We're good to go. So next, we're going to unarchive the 3 base system files of the operating system. So we'll first start with the base 61.tgz archive, and we're going to unarchive all of their files into the SSH chroot directory. So there's quite a bunch of things, so it might take a while. All right, next we're going to unarchive the comp61 package. This one should be shorter. And finally, we're going to extract the man61 packages as well. Now, if you're planning to use X Windows, you will need to unarchive all the other packages in the installation folders. However, in this video, we're just going to skip it and go full console instead. Once that's done, we'll need to build the /dev directory. Fortunately for us, OpenBSD makes it very easy with the make dev script. So just go into the /dev directory, and from there just call the make dev all script, and that's done. And the last thing we need to do is to link the shared libraries with our SSH chroot directory. So to do so, we're going to use the chroot command. So just type chroot, the directory you want the libraries to be linked to, ld-config, and then you just list all the location where the libraries you want to link are. So if you intend to use X Windows, you'll have a lot more libraries here than shown on the screen. And this is done also, and we're now done with creating our SSH chroot directory. We'll finish this section by setting up the permission and ownerships of these directories, because having the wrong permissions or having the wrong ownership can actually create errors later on. So we'll first set the ownership of the SSH directory. We'll set to root and will. It should already be that, but we're just going to make sure. And just to illustrate what should be the ownership of these directories, so we're going to do the FTP one next. And then we'll set up the permissions. Now we set up the permissions to 755 on both directories. If your permissions are too slack, OpenBSD will complain later on and will actually refuse connections to your FTP server or even maybe your SSH server. So 755 works well and makes OpenBSD happy. And now we can move on to creating the users. Note that you don't have to do this step, especially if you're only one user on your system. But if you expect a large user base, then having groups will make your life much easier, especially when times comes to configure your services. For this exercise, we'll create two groups, one for the SSH server and one for the SFTP server. Each of these groups will contain one user, one named SSH user and the other named FTP user. First, we'll create the groups using the group add command. So we'll create one group called SSH-users and another group for the FTP users. Now we'll create our SSH user using the user add command. So we'll tell the command that the group we want the user to be is SSH users. Its home directory will be in our chroot directory. And then we're gonna call it SSH-user. Afterwards, we're going to create our FTP user using basically the same command, but we're gonna put him into the FTP-users group. Its home folder will be the FTP chroot. And also this time we're going to specify the shell, and actually we're going to tell user-add that this user will have actually no shell, because the FTP user should only be able to access the FTP server and doesn't need a shell at all. So this is just good security practice of not giving users what they don't need. And the last step of this section is simply to give each user a password. So we'll create a password for the FTP user. Type it again, and then a password for the SSH user. Again, my opinion on this is that password doesn't have to be extremely complex. It just needs to be long and random enough. But anyway, that's a subject for another day. We're finally finished with the setup phase of this video, and we can now actually start setting up the SSH server. I'm going to assume that the SSH daemon is not enabled yet, but if you're not sure, you can quickly check to see if the SSHD process is currently running. And you can do this using ps-a pipe grep sshd. And if you get no output, that means the SSH daemon is not currently running. Otherwise, it's already started. So if your SSH server is not started yet, you can enable it first using the rcctl command and typing rcctl enable sshd. And if you want to start the server, use the same command, but instead of enable, use start. And then use the ps command again to confirm that the SSHD process is currently running. And as you can see on the screen, our SSH daemon is currently running, which means that you can actually log in into your new SSH server. So let's try it out. So at the prompt, type SSH space root at ::1. So we're going to log in into our SSH server as a root using the local IPv6 loopback interface. So press enter. Now you get a warning from the SSH client saying that he cannot authenticate our server. Fine, just type yes. Then you will get asked for your password. And once you entered your password correctly, you'll be greeted with a banner and you are currently in your SSH server. So it all worked. So perfect, first test pass. Let's log out for now. And that's it. You could actually stop here and have a fully functional SSH server already. But let's customize it a little bit more. To customize our SSH server, we're going to edit the configuration file, which is at /etc/sshd/sshd_config. So using vi, open this file. There are quite a few things you can change in this file, and we will go over some of them. But for now, we want the server to use our chroot directory and be restricted to the SSH users group. Also, one of the things I want to change in my SSH server is that I want it to listen only for IPv6 addresses. So I'm going to change the address family parameter from any to inet6. So this change will cause the SSH daemon to listen only for IPv6 connections. The next change we're going to make is to add one line to allow only our SSH users to use the server. And for this, we're going to use the allow groups parameter and set it to SSH-users space FTP-users. So this will allow any users part of these two groups to access our SSH server. Later on, we'll restrict the FTP users to the FTP server. The next modification is to tell the SSH daemon to use our new chroot directory. And for this, we'll need to uncomment the change root parameter and change its value to the path of our chroot directory, which is /chroot/ssh. So once user connect to our server, they will be transferred to this new chroot jail. Another change that we want to make is to forbid the root account to actually use the SSH server. And to do this, we're going to uncomment the permit root login parameter and change its value from prohibit password to no. Now, for some reason, OpenBSD is one of the few operating systems that allows the root account to use the SSH server. I don't know why. All right, we're done with configuration change for the moment. So let's save and restart our SSH server to see if everything still works. One thing we can do first is to make sure that our configuration file is valid. And for that, we can use SSHD-T. If everything is fine, this command will just output the contents of our configuration file. If there's something wrong, it will output some error messages specifying what's wrong with it. Since everything is good, we're going to use rcctl restart SSHD, and as you can see, everything is okay. The first thing that we are going to confirm is that the root account cannot use the SSH server anymore. So let's try to log in as root again. Here's my password. And permission denied. Good. Let's try it again to make sure. Yeah, I just lost access to the SSH server as root as expected. Okay, next, let's try to log in as the SSH user, which is part of the SSH users group, which should be given access to the server. So let's try it. Here's the password. And yes, we have successfully logged in. Let's try some basic commands to make sure that everything runs as expected. Looks good. We can see that we are currently in our chroot jail, as the home folder of the SSH user is currently there, and it's the only location that should exist. So let's exit, and here we go. The SSH user works. And the last thing I want to confirm is that the SSH daemon is no longer listening for IPv4 connections. So all I need to do is check with netstat, and I should only see one line outputted, and it should be the TCP6 line, and it is. So far so good. So we have a pretty robust SSH server going on for ourselves right now. So let's move on and set up the SFTP server. So setting up the SFTP server is as easy as setting up the SSHD server. For this, we'll need to edit our config file again. So reopen it using VI. And we are going to change two parameters right now. The first one is the subsystem parameter for SFTP. So right now it's set at SFTP-server or something else. We're going to change it to internal-SFTP. Next, we're going to add another section to the file, and we're going to type what you're currently seeing at the screen, which is match group FTP-users, which means that anytime a member of the FTP-users group attempts to log into the SSH server, the following comments will be executed. So meaning that when a FTP user logs in internal SFTP will be executed. It will be assigned to the chroot FTP directory, and we're going to make sure that no banner is displayed. And the reason for that is that it tends to create some errors later on when you sign in for some reason. At this point, we are finished modifying the configuration file. So just save it, exit VI, and restart your SSHD server. And now let's try to log in into our SFTP server using the FTP-user account. And for this, we're going to use SFTP, FTP-user at ::1, enter your password, and voila, we have logged in successfully into our SFTP server. We can issue some comments. Of course, there is absolutely nothing on it right now. You can use the help command to display some functions you can use. And for now, let's exit since we're pretty much done. And here we go. You now have a fully functional SSH and SFTP server on OpenBSD 6.1. Right now, we can only download files from our SFTP server. So let's create an uploads directory in order to store files on it. Alright, so in your chroot FTP directory, create a new directory called uploads. And then we're going to set the permissions to write for the FTP-users group. And then we're actually going to give ownership of this directory to members of the FTP users group. So we can write in it. And here you go. That's all you need to do for this. Let's try it out. So we're going to connect to our SFTP server again using the SFTP program. And once this is done, we'll try to first put a test file into the root directory. And of course it fails because we don't have write permissions on that directory. So let's move to the uploads and let's try again. And there we go, it worked. So we can now upload files to our server using the secure SFTP method. Before we end this video, I want to highlight two issues that you may run into if you try further configuration change on the SFTP server. The first one is caused by the SSH server outputting unexpected messages during connection. So what will happen is that when you try to log in into your SFTP server, you'll get an error message stating that the client received a message that is too long. To solve this issue, disable all your banners, and if you have any shell scripts that gets executed on login, make sure they don't output any messages via the echo command, for example. Misconfiguration of permissions, either in your SSH configuration file or on your directories, will also cause most of your issues. In these cases, you will get permission denied error messages when you attempt to log in into your servers, even with the proper password. To troubleshoot these problems, you will need to consult the /var/log/offlog file in order to see more details about what is actually causing the problem. Some of the things SSH might complain about is bad directory ownership configuration or users not being part of the proper groups. In both cases, review directory permissions, user groups, and your SSH configuration file. Don't forget to restart the SSH daemon as needed. I'll stop here for today. To recap, in this tutorial, we successfully set up SSH and SFTP on an OpenBSD 6 server. We did so by following good security practices, including adding isolation for our services by using chroot shells, and also by limiting the access of the servers to authorized users. In the follow-up tutorial, my intention is to further tighten the security of our server by using single packet authorization in order to conceal our SSH port from the ongoing background scans of the internet. If you want to learn more about this topic, consult the links in the description of this video. And that's all for today. If you have any question or additional information, leave a comment below. Also, if you have enjoyed this video and learned something, please consider leaving a like or subscribing to my channel. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.